Do you know which car brand makes the most money in the world? Not Ferrari. Not Toyota. Not Mercedes-Benz. It is Porsche. Based in Stuttgart, Germany, this sports car manufacturer has long held the title of the world's most profitable automaker, thanks to its astonishing profit margins. But if you go back 30 years to 1992, you would see a completely different picture. Porsche's factories were deserted. Production lines were inefficient. The company was losing money on every car it built. Banks refused to lend. Workers were anxious. The media had already put Porsche on its bankruptcy watch list. No one back then could have imagined that this struggling little German carmaker would, 20 years later, turn into a money printing machine and almost swallow the Volkswagen Group, which was dozens of times larger. How did Porsche pull off this incredible turnaround? What counterintuitive business logic lies behind its success? In this video, we will break down every step of Porsche's journey from the ruins to the throne, starting from first principles. First, let's look at some astonishing numbers. According to the disclosures made during Porsche's IPO, its profit per car was close to €20,000, while the industry average was only about $2,000 to $3,000. In 2024, Porsche delivered roughly 310,000 vehicles worldwide, achieved a group operating profit of €5.64 billion, and maintained a high sales return of 14.1%. For comparison, Toyota's profit per car in fiscal 2024 was about $2,000. Ferrari made more profit per car, but its annual sales volume was a fraction of Porsche's. Porsche has achieved what seems impossible. It commands the pricing power of a luxury brand while enjoying the economies of scale of a mass producer. It is both the holy grail of sports cars and a cash cow of the mass market. How was this money-printing machine built? Porsche's success can be broken down into three keys: extreme industrial efficiency, a brilliant product matrix, and insane financial gamesmanship. The first key: saving German pride the Japanese way. Porsche's success story must begin with a moment when the company was almost dead. In 1992, Porsche sold only 14,362 cars for the whole year, 1/4 of its peak volume, and posted a loss of $133 million. The production process was slow, redundant, and inefficient, and product quality was unstable. Most of the management came from engineering backgrounds. They believed that all the problems were caused by a deteriorating market, not by themselves. That arrogance nearly killed Porsche. The savior was a man named Wiedeking. Born in 1952, he studied mechanical engineering. He joined Porsche's board in 1991 and became chairman of the board the following year. He was the first CEO in Porsche's history who did not come from the Porsche family. That meant he had no historical baggage and could do whatever was necessary. Wiedeking did something that was considered outrageously unorthodox at the time. He traveled to Japan 4 times to study Toyota's factories, and then brought in Toyota consultants. Lean production was the signature strength of the Japanese. Asking a proud German sports car brand to learn from the Japanese was nothing short of humiliation. But Wiedeking did not care. He realized that Porsche's internal thinking was one-sided. Most of Porsche's management believed that they were no worse than any Japanese company. When the Toyota consultants walked into Porsche's factories, they pointed out every wasteful step in front of the German engineers. The concept of zero inventory was introduced. Parts no longer sat in warehouses for weeks. Instead, they were delivered to the exact workstation at the exact time they were needed. After drastic reforms, Porsche cut the time needed to build one car from 120 hours to 45 hours. That was a nearly 3-fold reduction, which greatly lowered labor costs. At the same time, Wiedeking pushed against opposition and began developing 2 crucial models. The first was the Boxster. It was a roadster priced lower than the 911, with a futuristic look. It could capture younger customers and share many parts with other models. Because Porsche was short of money, Wiedeking even cooperated with Audi to produce the high-performance Wagon RS2 in order to raise cash. At the Detroit Auto Show in late 1991, the Boxster occupied almost the entire center stage and attracted a flood of orders. Porsche immediately decided to put the concept car into production almost unchanged. The result proved that this was a decision that saved Porsche. The second and even more critical model was the Cayenne. When Wiedeking proposed that Porsche should build an SUV, die-hard 911 fans around the world exploded. They said that Porsche was a sports car brand, How could it build such a bulky off-roader? This was a betrayal of the brand. This was bowing to money. But Wiedeking's business logic was razor-sharp. Porsche had discovered that many 911 owners already had a Range Rover or a Mercedes G-Class at home. Since you were going to buy an SUV anyway, why not buy one with a Porsche badge? That insight seemed simple, but it changed Porsche's destiny. But how could Porsche build an SUV at the lowest possible cost? The answer was platform sharing. The Cayenne shared its chassis with the Volkswagen Touareg, with up to 80% common parts. Porsche only had to pay a technology licensing fee, then redesign the exterior, interior, and suspension tuning, and finally install its own engine and transmission. The Touareg and the Cayenne both came from Volkswagen Group's PL71 platform. The two cars used exactly the same suspension structure and materials. Yet the Cayenne's price was almost double that of the Touareg. Every Cayenne sold brought Porsche several times more profit than the Touareg. After its launch, the Cayenne sales soared. Many of the fans who had shouted the loudest eventually became among the first to place orders. Because they discovered that the Cayenne still drove like a Porsche, just with a higher ground clearance. The Cayenne's success dramatically boosted Porsche's cash flow. To this day, the Cayenne accounts for about 1/3 of Porsche's total sales. Under Wiedeking's leadership, Porsche had largely recovered by 1995 and continued to grow rapidly over the next decade and more, becoming the world's most profitable car manufacturer. As a professional manager, Wiedeking created enormous wealth for shareholders. He himself became the highest-paid executive in Germany, with an annual salary that once reached 80 million euros. The second key, the complementary matrix of 911 and Cayenne. Porsche's business landscape is a remarkably clear closed loop. At the top of the pyramid sits the 911. Since its launch in 1963, cumulative sales of the 911 series have reached 1 million units, and more than 70% of them are still roadworthy. For Porsche, the 911 is like the monogram for Louis Vuitton or the Datejust for Rolex, a classic product that makes a brand memorable and desirable. In the hierarchy of Porsche models, the 911 always stands at the very top. It is Porsche's spiritual totem. In the eyes of many car enthusiasts, Porsche equals the 911, and the 911 equals Porsche. The profits generated by other models are partly used to develop the 911, and the 911 itself also believes that. It has a pure sports car heritage and an unshakable status. The 911's mission is not to make money, but to plant a flag. It tells the world that Porsche can build the best sports car on the planet. With that flag planted, Porsche's other models gain pricing power. When you buy a Porsche Cayenne SUV, even though it shares a platform with the Volkswagen Touareg, you are willing to pay twice as much because of the Porsche badge on the hood. The middle of the pyramid consists of the Panamera and the Taycan. These four-door coupes and electric sports cars inherit the 911 sporting DNA but are more practical and more comfortable. The Taycan is Porsche's ambitious move into the electric era. It proves that even without the roar of a combustion engine, Porsche can still command a premium price. At the base of the pyramid are the Cayenne and the Macan. These two SUVs contribute more than half of Porsche's sales. In 2024, Porsche's best-selling model globally was the Cayenne, with over 100,000 deliveries, ahead of the Macan, 83,000, and the 911, 51,000. They are Porsche's cash cows, responsible for turning brand equity into real money. They share their platforms with Volkswagen, so their development costs are very low, but their selling prices are very high. Every Cayenne or Macan sold adds a large sum to Porsche's profit statement. The most brilliant part of this pyramid structure is that each layer supports the layer above. The money earned from SUVs is poured into the development of the 911 and the Taycan, and the technological breakthroughs from the 911 and Taycan in turn feed back into performance upgrades for the SUVs. At the same time, the entire system shares Volkswagen Group's platforms and supply chain, keeping costs to a minimum. This is the fundamental reason why Porsche can maintain both high brand premium and high profit margins. The third key, a hedge fund dressed as a car maker. But what truly elevated Porsche from an automobile manufacturer into a business beast was not car making. It was its astonishing financial operations. In September 2005, Porsche announced to the world that it wanted to acquire the Volkswagen Group. What kind of giant was Volkswagen? Volkswagen's annual sales volume was dozens of times that of Porsche. Its number of employees was dozens of times larger. Its revenue was beyond Porsche's reach. It was unheard of for a niche sports car company to try to acquire a hugely profitable mass-market automaker. Everyone thought Porsche had gone mad. But Wiedeking and Porsche's CFO, Holger Harter, were deadly serious. At the time, Porsche also faced a formidable legal obstacle. Germany had a special Volkswagen law tailored for Volkswagen. It stipulated that if a shareholder held less than 20% of Volkswagen shares, voting rights were proportional to the stake, but once the stake exceeded 20%, voting rights would not increase further unless the shareholder held more than 80% of Volkswagen shares. The state government of Lower Saxony held 20.1% of Volkswagen shares, which legally belonged to all the taxpayers of the state. Releasing those shares would require a vote in the state parliament or even a referendum, practically impossible. But Wiedeking noticed a loophole that the hedge funds had ignored. In 2007, the European Court of Justice ruled that the Volkswagen law violated European Union law and was therefore invalid. That meant Volkswagen's last protective shield had disappeared, and the legal obstacles to Porsche's acquisition were cleared. However, the vast majority of hedge funds on the market were unaware of this legal change, or simply dismissed it. They believed that Porsche could never acquire Volkswagen, so they began massively shorting Volkswagen shares, betting that the price would fall. Porsche's financial tactics were extraordinarily sophisticated. It first quietly bought Volkswagen shares to reach 42.6%. Then it stopped buying actual shares and instead purchased call options on Volkswagen shares, paying the full premium in cash without using leverage. This type of option is called a cash-settled stock option. After paying the premium, Porsche did not need to actually hold the shares. It only needed to have the corresponding rights on its books. In this way, Porsche could secretly build a huge long position without attracting market attention. In 2008, Porsche used such options to control an additional 31.5% of Volkswagen's free float shares. Adding these together, Porsche could control up to 74.1% of Volkswagen's total share capital, just one step away from the 75% control threshold. Considering that the state government shares could not be sold, the number of Volkswagen shares actually available for trading on the market was only 5.8%. At the same time, because short sellers were so aggressive, the total short interest in Volkswagen had reached 13% of the free float, equivalent to 10.4% of total share capital. The short sellers would have to buy shares to deliver to the longs on the settlement date, but only 5.8% of shares were freely tradable. That meant that even if the short sellers bought every available share on the market, they would still not have enough to deliver to the option longs. On October 27, 2008, the Frankfurt Stock Exchange witnessed the biggest short squeeze in history. Every institution that had shorted Volkswagen desperately tried to avoid being trapped in the 4.6% that had no shares to cover. The shorts scrambled to buy shares, even at prices many times higher than their original short positions. Volkswagen's share price soared 500% in 2 days, from €200 to over €1,000. Volkswagen's market capitalization temporarily surpassed that of ExxonMobil, making it the largest company in the world. In this battle, Porsche made a profit of €6.8 billion, while its automotive sales revenue for the period was only €1 billion. Overnight, Porsche turned from a carmaker into a hedge fund dressed as a car company. No wonder a media commentator said that Porsche had used a loophole in option disclosure rules to perfectly squeeze the shorts, a classic battle worthy of any hedge fund textbook. But the story does not end there. After the financial crisis struck, Porsche was burdened with more than €10 billion in debt from buying Volkswagen shares, and was eventually reverse acquired by Volkswagen. However, through a clever structure, the Porsche and Peach families still control the Volkswagen Group to this day. In 2009, Volkswagen announced it would buy Porsche for €8 billion. Wiedeking and Harter were forced to leave. Wiedeking received a severance package of €50 million and exited the stage he had fought for 16 years. In this multi-year capital war, Porsche demonstrated astonishing financial intelligence and decisiveness. It proved a profound truth: a top-tier industrial company must also possess top-tier capital operation capabilities if it is to survive in the industrial jungle. Porsche's success is not a story about speed. It is a story about efficiency and precision. It tells us that luxury goods can also be scaled. A sports car can also focus on cost. A myth can also be measured in profit margins. Porsche used Japanese lean production to pull itself back from the brink of death. It used a brilliant product matrix to build an unbreachable business moat. And it used almost insane financial gamesmanship to transform itself from an industrial strongman into a business beast. In Porsche's world, every single screw is designed for both profit and legend.